All right, Broncos country, we are live on the Mile High Huddle podcast. The gut reaction to that gut-wrenching game. We got to bring in our Facebook groups, Mile High Huddle, Mile High Huddle podcast, and then one more is the Mile High Huddle Denver Broncos super fans groups to get everybody in on Facebook as well. So we got to let it open up a little bit, let it breathe, let it get its fingers out in there, and that we can get started. So everybody is here tonight. Welcome in, everybody. This is the Mile High Huddle podcast, the gut reaction. I will be your co-host tonight with Zack, Kelberman. My name is Scott Kennedy. I'm filling in for the one of your football priests, Chad Jensen. So happy to be here tonight. What a game. Zack, I don't know if you can have a gut reaction to this game. There's so many reactions. I mean, you talk about a roller coaster of a game, Zack, but I'll give you, if anybody can do it, you can. What was your gut reaction to what you just saw, Broncos versus Commanders?
I'm honestly still trying to process what I just saw. I thought it was won in the first half. The Broncos had a commanding lead. I'm like, holy crap, who is this Russell Wilson? Where has this Broncos offense been? But it was too good to be true, as most things in Bronco land have been for 7 years. They blew the lead in the second half, and I thought the game was lost again. And then Brandon Johnson makes a tremendous Hail Mary to get the Broncos within 2, and then Sutton got held on the 2-point conversion. Incomplete pass, Broncos lose. They should have never, Scott, been in that position to lose by a 2-point conversion. First of all, I thought the defense once again blew it. You can focus on the offense all you want. You can blame Russ, blame Sean Payton, but the Broncos defense should not be this bad. They have too much talent to be this bad. And in fact, they look like exactly how they did in 2017 and 2018. When, you guessed it, VJ was the defensive coordinator. They just allow offenses, Scott, to march down the field against them, score at will like a hot knife through butter. There's no resistance. There's no sack to this Broncos defense, and it's hurting them every week. That's my takeaway.
All right, there's so much to get into. We're gonna try and keep this thing to, just an hour or so tonight. But I feel like and luckily we'll be back for Broncos for breakfast in the morning to keep it going. But you said there's too much talent for this defense. All right. Now let's dig into that real quick. There's too much talent for this defense to look that bad. Is there, though, really? Let's look at what you've got going on out there. When you start looking, where are the plus players on this defense? Not the plus dollars, but the plus players. If I'm going from back to front, I would probably on myself say I like DJ Jones. I'm not sure Zach Allen's there yet. Pat Surtain is obvious. Justin Simmons is pretty good. After that, where are you really above average on the defensive side of the ball?
I think, I agree with the premise that maybe we overrated the entire talent level on a macro level. But how come Ejiro Evero, Scott, he had as much as, if not less than the current talent level to work with, and the defense was humming? I mean, it really comes down to scheme for me.
Well, and as you know, I am much more of a personnel person than I am a scheme guy. Okay. So I start judging personnel movements, and it sounds like a bowel movement at this point, or lack thereof, by what I see on this. So when I see in this game, I know I've got a problem coming into this year at safety. I've got a problem at number 2 safety. So I'm counting on Caden Stearns as my starter. Zack, the guy's been injured most of his career.
Yeah.
Can I count on that guy? So what do? I draft a 6th-round guy that fell in the draft. Why did he fall in the draft, Zack? Everybody together now? Because he's been injured. And then I bring back Kareem Jackson, who was a liability last year, probably the year before that. When I keep doing the same thing over and over again, and that's just, one position, safety, but that, to me, that's kind of an overview of the problem this team has had in some of its free agent moves and some of its personnel decisions. We can get into that. I want to say hello to some folks that have come in nice and early with some super chats and whatnot. I know we're going to be busy tonight, so we'll try and get to everybody tonight. Thank you so much. Lucas has been pissed off and very aggressive today. He says Buff showed more heart than our team again. He followed that up. He says, let's tank for Sanders, Shedeur Sanders. Let's talk crazy. We suck. Appreciate you coming in, Lucas. Patriot Tech's coming in with a super chat. He says, I love MHH, but I am out on the Broncos. Today's inexcusable collapse is the last straw. Gut the roster, rebuild, fire George Payton, VJ, and move on. Russ can only play one half a game. I am so over it. Anything in there you disagree with?
I'm not quite at that level of I'm not that close to the edge, I think, as Patriot Tech is. I know 0-2, the hole is getting pretty insurmountable now. This was a must win, and it's pretty inexcusable to start your season at home against the Raiders and the Commanders and come out 0-2. We can drill a little deeper on VJ. I don't know exactly where you felt, Scott. I know that Chad wasn't really too upset, or he didn't push back too much against the rehiring of V. This was exactly the worry I had with him, though, is that every time we've seen his defense, they don't just bend but don't break. They bend and break. They're soft. They don't get enough pressure consistently. They don't take the ball away consistently. And more worrying to me is that the players under VJ seem to regress. We talk about the talent level, and I understand your point of view. It may not be as all world as we thought, but a good coach can take even a decent player and make them good. They can take a bad player and make them decent. They can take a good player and make them great. Under VJ, it seems to work in reverse. He takes a good player and they become mediocre. He takes a bad player, they become, unsalvageable, like Damari Mathis in week 1, for example. So I'm right there with you, Patriot Techs, on VJ, if only because he never, in my opinion, should have been rehired in the first place.
Yeah, and there's still NFL players on this team. Forget, to your point, what you're saying. You're going against the Washington Commanders, a second-year quarterback, first-year coach. No, Ron Rivera. Who's their coach now? Is it Ron Rivera?
Yeah.
He's been there a little bit longer than that. Rivera's been there. I like Ron Rivera. I think he's a good coach. But that said, once you went up 21-3, I think the possessions went something like this: touchdown, field goal, touchdown, missed field goal, touchdown, touchdown, ball game. Even if you're not at 100%, even if you are average, and you could have pushed back and said Singleton and Josie Jewell are probably above average. That's arguable for sure. Zack Allen, we'll see, new team, et cetera, et cetera. Even if you are average, you give up 5-6 straight scoring drives, something's wrong. Something's wrong. So I'm with you on that one too. Christian got us. Not sure how to pronounce your name. I'm going to butcher that. Help me out later. It says, absolutely embarrassing. This week felt like a must win to stay on track. To get on track, Christian. I don't know how you go into next week with any kind of hope. Keep up the good work, Priest and Deacon. MHH for life. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the support for the show. I think it was. I think it was a must win. For as much, again, someone can go. You go on a 10-1 run, you're going to be just fine. But when you start off 0-2, both games at home, both games favored, one against the surprising 2-0 Commanders. But if I'm on the outside looking in, I'm saying, yeah, but they played the Cardinals and the Broncos. How good can they possibly be? That's the perception how it's going to be. So unless this team makes a drastic improvement, this was a must win in order to reach the goals that you were going for, Zach.
And what makes it even tougher is that week 3, they're staring down 0-3 potentially because they have Miami coming up. That's an East Coast game at Miami, early afternoon, 1:00 Eastern kickoff. And Miami, based on week 1, I know they play tonight against the Patriots, but they were looking deadly. They're looking like a major superpower in the AFC. 0-3, your season's over. That's why it was so imperative the Broncos had to emerge today with a win and really take advantage, Scott, of that easy portion, quote unquote, easy portion of their schedule. But another thing is maybe we overestimated how easy that portion could be. Maybe other teams looking at the Broncos and still thinking, hey, this is a gimme game.
Yeah, they're going to overlook you. If you've set them up great, they're going to go in overconfident and overlook the Broncos. I actually had somebody say that on a post one time. So, looking at it, we penciled in, I think universally, MHH crew penciled in at Miami as a loss. And I said, watch out for the Chicago Bears. We're not sure what we're going to get there. So far, it's been bad. So far, what you've gotten from the Chicago Bears has not been good. But I got an LOL. I love those, in my opinion. LOL, we're not losing to the Bears. At what point do you have the right to say you're going to beat anybody with certainty?
Exactly.
On the road? At what point? You're what, 4-15 in your in the last season plus 2 games? You can lose to anybody on the road against the Chicago Bears. Yeah, that's not a gimme. And then you come back, New York Jets, easier game, certainly not a gimme at that point either. And then at Kansas City, Green Bay at home, at Kansas City again, at Buffalo. Oof. He said the problem with starting 0-2 is 0-2 can turn into 1-7 in a freaking hurry.
Exactly.
That's the problem with it. Addison, appreciate you coming in, Green. He says this team is not going to compete this year. Time to sell off valuable assets. JJ, Simmons, etc. Anyone you can get something for except PS2. Unfortunately, Addison, your best asset is PS2. Yeah. After that, Josie Jules in the last year of a contract is an inside linebacker. There's guys that had 160 tackles last year and are signing on practice squads. Justin Simmons is a 30-plus-year-old safety with $18 million sitting on his contract. It's much more flexible next year, but again, you start talking about selling off. Usually to sell, you have to sell something you don't want to give up. That's the only way you get anything in return. So again, we'll get into it, I'm sure, over the course of the next week, the different options you're going to have for rebuilding for 2024. And part of that isn't getting something for Simmons. It's maybe a restructure and a trade. It's Garrett Bowles is on a big contract that changes next year. So all of those different things. Addison, thank you so much. Want to say hello to the Facebook groups. I'm not going to be able to flash them for you. So just want to make sure you know how we think of you, and thank you for the support. Michael Ronquillo comes. He says, good evening, Zack and Scott on the Mile High Huddle podcast. Go Broncos and buck 'em. Thank you, Michael. Lawrence Rivera. All I got to say is Eric Bieniemy offense is the real deal. People can't say it was all Reed anymore. All it took was his adjustment to beat us. It's a good point. We want to look internally, right? We want to say it's all Vance Joseph's fault. Well, maybe it was all, if you're looking at, if you think that Eric Bieniemy is the answer, maybe it was all Eric Bieniemy. Obviously, it mixes in there somewhere in between. It's not one or the other, Zach.
Well, yeah, I mean, I always like to say that the other team gets paid too. The other coaches get paid too, so credit where it's due. But for the second week in a row, it was a major coaching mismatch. And this is my opinion. Last week, it was Josh McDaniels versus VJ. And this week, it's Eric Bieniemy versus VJ. And that's just a major no contest in terms of coaching acumen, in terms of situational awareness, what play to call. I know the Broncos offense, and I'm not going to make excuses for them. They went into a shell in the second half for the most part. They still don't know how to keep their collective foot on the gas and keep the momentum going from the first to the second half. That's on them. But when the opponent, and we saw it in the preseason from the very first week, when they go right down the field, super easy. These weren't complicated concepts, Scott, that Eric Bieniemy was running. They were shallow crossers and getting the ball to your playmakers like Gibson and McLaurin. It's easy stuff. But when you're at a certain level and your opponent is beneath you, as I think he is, then it becomes what we saw today, which is just way too easy, unacceptably easy against the Broncos defense.
Yeah, especially, remember last week I said, what was the biggest problem I had with where that game was won and lost? For me, it was 1st and 8, 1st and goal at the 8 with a chance to go up 2 scores, and instead you settle for a field goal. In this case, when the Washington Commanders had the ball with a chance to go up 2 scores, what do? Like you said, marched right down the field, put it in the end zone, went up 2 scores, and made it way, way too easy. Plum Bob, he's pissed. He says this is a horrible team. I'm not going to argue with you right now, man. They're 0-2 when I think most of us had 2-0 going in. They're not a good team right now. There's a lot of problems. Jonathan Vingaroa says the offense is not to blame for this loss, nor special teams. VJ is terrible. Horrible defensive game plan. The defense sucks, man. And again, we could slice out portions. To say these guys aren't to blame isn't true. Whether I'm saying about defense, special teams, everybody has a part in it. Mm-hmm. Again, killing the game off. The offense gets up 21-3. Then you should be able to kill the game off. That's part of it. but you got to get some stops in there. And then once momentum's crazy, man. I don't remember if you're old enough to remember the old Madden games where they actually had a momentum meter in it. They tried to quantify it. It's once it goes, it's hard to turn it back around. It really is. Appreciate you coming in, Jonathan. Want to say hello to more on Facebook. Matthew Beatty comes in, says, with the first pick in the 2024 draft, the Broncos select. Who are we picking?
Quarterback, probably at this rate.
It's got to be quarterback. It's got to be. I mean, you're going to have to rebuild. And even if you just mothball Russell Wilson and eat his salary, because that would be cheaper than trying to offload him and eating the dead cap, is just stick him with the reserves for a year. That's what we call it in soccer. Let him train with the youth team. And if he demands a trade, okay, you're going to have to sign a new contract. You're going to have to give back all your signing bonus and if you want to get a trade. So I'm with you on that one. And I would think the only way you're going to be able to offset his costs at quarterback is to bring in a cheap quarterback and then you divide it by 2. Okay, well, I've got $40 million in my quarterback, but I have a new quarterback I'm building around. Isaiah brings up a good point. Gave up 7 sacks. We talk about everything else. And I think the offensive line on the whole is playing better than it was last year, but it's still not playing well.
Mm-hmm.
They give up 7 sacks. This is a good front in Washington. And when they're good, they're really good. They've put a lot of money into that defensive front. It's a good front, but how do you give up 7 sacks when you're up 21-3? Isn't this a running team, Zach?
Yep. Should be.
It should be, right? Riddle me that one. I'm up 21-3. That was right score. What? I'm not misquoting that by like 2 points or something. I'm up 21-3, and I give up 7 sacks. That shouldn't happen. As Chris Hernandez says, I have nothing to say. Disappointing yet again. We have something to say to you, Chris. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your support and everything you do for MHH. Over on the Facebook side of things, George Fox has come in with some stars. He says, Russ needs to take a big pay cut. He's not even close to his output. Yeah, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I mean, you can't blame the player for taking the contract that was offered to him. That's just not how it works. Unless he wants to move, it's like, listen, I'd like to, my agent's been working. He wants to send me to X team, whatever. Okay. Well, the only way that's going to happen is if we redo your deal and you're going to have to give back a lot of money. Only way. Flasify says season's over. I can't wait to watch next week. It's going to be a frenzy. What do you think about next? Are you ready to get in next week at all? I don't know if we're ready for that.
I think it could be a pretty brutal game. I want to see how the Dolphins play tonight. But it's a homecoming game for Vic Fangio in a sense. He coaches the Dolphins defense now. I think they'll be up for that. And Tua and the Dolphins offense is looking just unstoppable. It could be, if they can't stop Sam Howell, Scott, how are they going to stop Tua? But really quickly to backpedal just a second about Russ. I understand the anger and the frustration right now, and the offense wasn't good enough. And to your point, Scott, to quote Sean Payton, there's stink on a lot of people's hands right now over the loss. But let's take a look at Russell Wilson's numbers for today's game. 18 of 32 for 308, 3 touchdowns, an interception. He took 7 sacks, as we talked about, had a quarterback rating of 107.3. I understand a little bit of that is inflated with the Hail Mary at the end, but for the most part, I know the fumble, whatever, for the most part, I don't know how anyone can look me in the eye and say Russell Wilson is the sole reason the Broncos lost this game. Let me survey the comment section really quickly. Raise your hand if you believe on a majority basis, 51-49, if the defense was to blame for the Broncos loss today. Let me know.
I think there's going to be – I don't think anybody's going to say – I don't think that's the point, Zach. It's just that the resources that he's going to take up are not equal to what you're getting from him, and that is a problem for an older quarterback. Like saying, okay, he's especially when you move into next year when his salary cap escalates again, and just say we're not getting enough for a $50 million quarterback that's going to eat up a quarter of our salary cap. We've got to move on and start building for the future because the present is dead. That's the impression I get. Not that it was Russell Wilson's fault. It's just this team's not going anywhere with Russell Wilson. We've got to do something different.
I don't know. I mean, maybe we'd slightly disagree on this. Russell Wilson was also the Broncos' leading rusher with
I know that was the part I was going to say.
Yards on 6 carries in his age 35 season. I know about his contract. I know the Broncos keep losing and it falls at his feet ultimately, but we were begging, Scott, just to maybe we can agree on this. We were begging to see this level of play. It's not great still, but just to get to that level of being competent from Russell Wilson. And regardless of the record, he is looking like a better passer, a better quarterback.
Russell Wilson, you didn't lose this game because of Russell Wilson. We're definitely on the same page with this. I'm just trying to translate a little bit of the frustration with, we gave up all of this. We're going to have to pay him all of this. It's not good enough. It's time to cut bait and move on without him. And I get that. I do get that. It's like, let's say, okay, we're not going to take a quarterback. We're sitting there with the number 2 pick and we're going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. instead of Drake May. Well, don't pass on a quarterback again, man. Don't. Am I saying meow? Hello. Thank you for being patient. And are you saying meow? I don't know. Now I'm intrigued. Diego Alonso said, this team is so frustrating. I don't know what happens to this team after halftime. Diego reminds me, do you know what the record is for the Denver Broncos with a lead at halftime?
Can't be good.
0-9.
Not surprised.
They have lost 9 straight games, including 0-2 this year, with a lead at halftime. That's unbelievable, Zach. That's unbelievable. I'd say there's enough reason that your strength and conditioning staff fired right there, without asking any other questions. That really is unbelievable. Appreciate you, Diego. Thanks for coming in with the super chat. Justin Massey, he comes in with another good point. Lots of good points today, y'all. Hey, fellas, thought it was really weird that P. Ryan only had 1 rush, and it came in the second half. Big stars in there. Thank you, sir. 500 stars. So the game plan to open up, I mean, obviously it worked, so it felt like it was really good, Zach. But going in, and I see the super chats are stacking up, so I'll try and keep this quick. But going in, when we came out of last week, we said we need to get X player involved. This player needs to step it up. This needs to happen. So as I'm taking notes when this starts, I hear, okay, Drew Sanders is on the field on the very first drive. Randy Gregory has a sack on the very first drive. Who has the first touch of the game? Jerry Jeudy. He's back in the very first drive. Who gets the first touchdown? The guy they're trying to get the ball to earlier. Jaleel McLaughlin. Who impacts the game greatly that they wanted to get more involved to stretch the defense? Marvin Mims. Twice. 21-3. Then what? What happened, man? All these guys we were talking about, you did it. And then, I mean, I know the other team makes adjustments too, but then what happened, dude?
Foot off the gas. That's why they're 0-9 at halftime. Remember, it was 2020. They were playing the Vikings. They were up 20-0 at halftime. They lost that game. It doesn't really matter. It's when it's a culture of losing and the head coach changes, the quarterback changes, personnel changes. The Broncos just don't know how to win. And that's become a problem, obviously.
Phoenix comes in, and this just sounds harsh. Harsh. Watch your language. Impossible task for offense to overcome this D. If you hire a proven nincompoop, and that's what you get. They have talent, but they will never hold when needed. Enough said. I mean, when you throw out a nincompoop, it's getting nasty. Nasty in here. I think it was perfect use of the word. Phoenix, thank you. Grover coming in, Yella with the Yella super chat. Thank you very much. Defense and offense both look great in the first half. All of his energy seemed to shift after that Russ fumble. Yes, it did. This team has zero mental fortitude. Then the no call on the 2-point conversion was horrible.
Yeah,
it did. That was one of the things I didn't when I started talking about the the 21-3 and not stopping anybody. A lot of it happened after that fumble. But dude, you got a 20-point lead. You can't survive a fumble. You know what happens? Your sphincter puckers up to the point that you can't think anymore. It cramps all the way to your brain. Help me with this.
That's sudden. I'll say this, Scott. If it was any other quarterback and any other team except the Broncos and Russell Wilson, they would have called that a hold or a PI in the end zone. Sutton was being interfered with. They should have called it, but they swallow their whistles when it comes to the Broncos. But again, I'm not blaming the refs. This game should have never come down to a 2-point conversion. They had this in the bag and they blew it. I agree with the previous comment. They have zero mental, and I'll say this, or testicular fortitude. This Broncos team still, it pains me. Big Sean Payton fan, had high hopes, still have high hopes, relatively speaking, but they have to nut up quickly.
Yeah, it's a little mentally soft out there. Where are your Warriors? Oh, and I think Diego said, hey, to my Falcons, they're not my Falcons. Who I watch, who I fandom for is Chelsea Football Club, and they look worse than the freaking Broncos right now. My God.
Sorry,
anyway. I mean, this is a macro team. This is like the only macro team in my life. Everything else is like underdogs. I went to Auburn, not Alabama. I grew up an Atlanta sports fan. I don't have winners in my life. Chelsea was one of those teams. I've even screwed them up. FA. Look at FA coming in huge.
Thank you,
How
FA.
do you miss that pass interference? Jesus Christ, are you kidding me? The refs must hate Sean Payton. Seen some strange calls all the time, man. You're supposed to get some of those at home, though, aren't you, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a winning team and if you're a team that doesn't have the reputation like the Broncos have, it's the same reason that Kareem Jackson, we talked about it, he got dinged for another helmet to helmet. And that was way more obvious today, but it's the same reason he got called last week. He has a reputation that precedes him, and that reputation is not very flattering. The reputation the Broncos have is that a team that hasn't won squad in 7 years, they can't close out a game. They might get a lead, but it's going to evaporate and they're going to lose. And to the haters' credit and to the referees' credit, they were right. So until the Broncos buck that, literally and figuratively, and they start to win games and show they're not a lovable band of losers, they are not going to get that call. It's the brutal truth of the NFL.
Any problem with the call against Kareem Jackson to eject him?
No, I mean, again, he knows better, and I said this last week, and that was just blatantly helmet-to-helmet headhunting. I understand he wants to make a play. He's the hard hitter, but he's hurting his team, hurting the defense, and he's been that way, Scott, since he's pretty much been in Denver. I'm kind of getting sick of it.
Yeah, Jeremy, if you're here, Jeremy responded back to me on Twitter when I posted it. It's like, well, if he ducks down or what, how are you supposed to lead for the shoulder in your helmet? And it's like, it doesn't have anything to do with the helmet. It was if he had hit him with his shoulder in the chin or his forearm in the chin on that play by jumping up and launching into him,
right,
he was done. Doesn't matter what he hit him with at that point. As the word that Zack used, the term was headhunting. And that's absolutely what he did in that case. Yeah. And intent doesn't have anything to do with it. It's like, oh, I didn't mean to hit him in the head. You did. I didn't mean to T-bone that car. Doesn't matter. You did. So no, I didn't have any problem with that one. And this one might cost him a couple of games, Zach. This one, after back-to-back plays, and this one was pretty, it started a little scuffle. This one might cost him a few games.
He's lucky to have a job. I mean, he knows better. If that's the case, then that's the case. I'll support that.
MJA 2873 comes in. He says, time to blow it up. Tank for Caleb or Shador or Drake May. If I thought this was Arizona Cardinals, New York Giants, you want to see a team that got a call from the ownership and the GM at halftime and said, what the hell are you doing? It's 28-0. You're not supposed to win. Oh, sorry. Yeah, they didn't. I almost feel like, is that what we're doing here? I mean,
maybe.
I don't think there's any possible way that's what the Broncos are doing. They're just not winning. They're just not winning.
I didn't see this one coming in the script for this season, Scott. Not at all. It's a damn shame.
Elliott, it's good to see you. I feel like it's been a little bit. It's good to see you again. He says, tough loss. This one hurt. I'm going to throw my Wilson jersey into Lake Powell. Myself and my boys are still riding for our Broncos. Yeah, you never give up. Yeah. I mean, you can be mad, but you're going to be a fan in 10 years when there's nobody associated with this team still on this team. You'll outlast them. You will outlast the bad times and enjoy the good ones. You're a fan for life. Appreciate you, Elliott. David McElrath coming in. Good to see you, the Papa Bears. It's good evening, Broncos country. Zach, Deacon, Scott. Dylan, 12-5. I'll take the under on that one, Dave. Welcome times 10, Mile High for life. Denver Broncos for life. Appreciate you coming in on like that. Patriot Tech coming in again. Thank you, sir. Says Peyton has to go. He's in love with draft picks. Is he? and free agents to spend more time. Oh, there we go. I didn't finish it. Finish it, Scott. He's in love with draft picks and free agents to spend more time on IR than helping this club. Payton is a mediocre GM, and we were less than a mediocre team. I cannot see really any way that George Payton is the general manager of this team 12 months from now.
I agree. Yeah, I think it was always going to be an arranged marriage that was short-lived, and they were going to ride it out to see how they'd work together. And I think to their credit, they're trying to make it work. I mean, two people that probably are on different wavelengths completely. And George Payton knows the writings on the wall. As soon as Sean Payton came in, he was the GM and the de facto GM and the head coach as well. It's one of those cases where, if Russell Wilson or the Broncos win this game, Russell Wilson throws for 300, 3 touchdowns, quarterback rating of 107, then you're praising George Payton for bringing Russell Wilson in, but it's one of those cases he doesn't win the game. So you're criticizing Payton for bringing Russ in. And
so many really good coaches have failed because they thought they were general managers too. So many of them. I think the first time I really remember it started happening was with Mike Holmgren. He got a big deal, I think, to go to the Seahawks back in the late 80s or early 90s. Bill Parcells. The Denver Broncos know it as well as anybody because that's what cost Dan Reeves 3 jobs. Wonderful coach, really good football coach. Thought he knew how to build a team also. People want to talk about Bill Belichick. What's he done without Brady? Well, he's the GM, de facto GM for that team as well. That might be where it's starting to go wrong, or where it has gone wrong, is getting the players in, not necessarily just the quarterback. So I don't know if Sean Payton necessarily wants to be involved in every single decision-making and be the final say. But in order to give that up, he's got to have somebody. He's got to have his own guy in there. He's got to have his guy that he can trust to turn that over. And I don't know if that's there with George Payton.
I don't think it is. I think he wants Jeff Ireland from the Saints. I think he will bring him aboard when he can. But yeah, I don't think George Payton's long for Denver at this rate, with his big feather in his cap, Russell Wilson, not really paying off as they thought he would.
Yeah, FA coming in. Appreciate you, FA. For everything you do for us. He says, what a game, though. It was entertaining. I'll give you that. This team is just not used to winning. We showed improvement this week. What the heck happened to the defense? I'm still confident in this team. The Chargers are 0-2, but man, another 1-score loss. This is getting brutal. And part of it was you were switching possessions quicker. You were just giving up scores faster. It was not that much different than last week in scores per possession. The bigger plays were coming in, FA. The defense was not good last week. You can say 17 points, but you weren't getting any stops. It just took longer. It's like instead of a 4-play, 5-play, 6-play and hurry up and a 4-minute drive, it was an 8-play, 8-minute drive that ended in the same. It seemed to go faster because both teams were scoring quicker this time, but it was the same result. Points at the end of drives for both teams for a lot of the time, FA.
I'll tell you what happened to the Broncos defense. Vance Joseph happened again. I'm sorry. I hate to keep harping on it, but if you put on tape from 2017 or 2018 when VJ was the architect of that defense, or even calling the defensive plays, it was the same song and dance. It was the same end result. They would look good for maybe a quarter, maybe a couple quarters, but they would always blow it in crunch time. They would always allow an opponent to score a touchdown or get a first down when they cannot allow it at all. We saw it in the first game of the preseason. We saw it last week, and a lot of people wanted to, put their hands over their eyes and cover their ears and say, oh, it's only 17 points. The offense lost it. No, the context of the game was they got no sacks, no pressure, couldn't get off the field. They did not do their jobs, and they were even worse today. VJ is simply not a good defensive coordinator. That's not my opinion. That's just his resume and the stats since he's been in the NFL.
And here's the thing, because Ethan, I'm not even sure if he's disagreeing with you, because you can both be right here. Ethan, the DWI guy comes in with a huge super chat. Thank you, sir. He says, let's be honest. Denver's defense was horrible at the end of halves all last year. It's not coaching. It's the players. Simply lack of talent on the defensive side. Do not sugarcoat it anymore. You have PS2, but that's really it. So we've talked about Russell Wilson. What's the big problem with Russell Wilson that we were saying is, not necessarily that his play was all that bad, but that you're not getting the ROI, the return on investment. So let's see where our man Justin Simmons is ranked, because he is the number 1 cap hit among safeties out of, let's say you say 2, you're playing 2 at a time. That's 64 safeties. He's got the highest cap hit among safeties in the entire NFL. Where are you he's not that far off of that though, is he? I mean, how far away would you say he is? Is he a top 5 guy? I think he probably was last year.
I think so.
But still, 18 million for his cap hit this year. But to Ethan's point here, and it's the same point I brought up earlier, those are your 2 for sure's. Okay, corner and safety. I got a really premium position and then a not so premium position that I'm dumping a ton of money into. And after that, where do I really have my difference? Oh, the Broncos got screwed by not having a Pro Bowler, this year, last year, this year, or just one with Patrick Surtain. But who consistently, week in and week out, is that guy that you think plays at a Pro Bowl level on the defense? I'm with you on this. And we said at the beginning of the season, the biggest fear I had was the front 5. Well, that's a big fear. When you're talking about Jonathan Harris coming in and being a starter, this was a guy I cut off the practice squad last year.
Yeah.
I love DJ Jones. Okay. And I push for Zack Allen. That's 2 out of 3, but you rotate the hell out of your defensive line. You need 6. You got 2. And then outside, you got a lot of bodies, but do you really have any difference makers? Jonathan Cooper showed in spots. Nick Bonito showed in spots, but they both got beat in spots that an upper level player might not. Randy Gregory had a sack on the first drive. Then what?
Yeah. MIA.
Where did he finish after that sack? Last week he had an assist. This week, not too bad. 5 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a pass defended. Hit the quarterback. So not bad. Not bad.
You guys know how I feel about Simmons. Anyone who ever said that he was the best safety in the NFL, I've consistently scoffed at that. But he is a top 7 guy, top 7 safety. I think that's a fair argument. And, I agree with the point you're making, Scott. I do. The defense, I think I'm guilty of overrating them a little bit, and I'll take responsibility. But if you boil it down, let's say Bill Belichick is the coach of the Broncos defense. He's the coordinator. If you give him Zack Allen, you give him DJ Jones, you give him Baron Browning, Randy Gregory, Alex Singleton, Josie Jewell, which are 2 lunge pail guys you love to have in the middle, Pat Surtain, Justin Simmons, I feel like that's a solid basis and foundation of talent. And I feel like if Bill Belichick was the coordinator, they wouldn't be allowing 35 points to the Commanders defense. If Bill Belichick was the coordinator, they wouldn't be making Jimmy Garoppolo look like Joe Montana, like in last week's game. So I think it's a player issue. It's a talent issue, and that would fall on the GM, but it's a bigger coaching and schematic issue, if only because we saw this before. We saw this exact same scenario play out for 2 years. And I know how the movie ends, put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think with a top-notch, but there's only so many years to go around, a top-notch defensive coordinator, I think you're probably 2-0. That's how close the games were.
Agreed.
But are you an 11-6 playoff team? Probably not. Maybe, but probably not. There's still big holes on the defense that we've talked about a zillion times. Shiloh, he says, I forgot to add my super chat. I apologize that I won't be able to get to your question because there's 1,300 unread chats on my side of things. I won't be able to find it. But thank you for coming in with a super chat. And sorry we couldn't get to your question, but I want to say thank you for the support that I missed it. Justin Kanicki comes in a little bit. That feels like a newer name.
Welcome.
I would have remembered the name Kanicki. I'm probably saying it wrong, but that's that was the co-star in Grease. That was like John Travolta's friend, Danny's friend. This is a prize for Elway getting us to a Super Bowl 50. Was it worth it?
I guess.
Was it worth it? Ask a Falcons fan. if they'd give up, if they'd give one up, if they would have endured. Because the thing is a lot of times there's teams that have to endure this crap without the Super Bowl.
Detroit.
So that's the price. Appreciate you, Justin. Kendrick Ware, when will the stability start? He says, shaking my head, our team disappointing. It is, if you're going to be disappointed, there's still that hope because you've seen enough to know you're this close. You're close. Where last year it was close because you were bungling around and your defense was playing well. This time you've seen glimpses of both. I've seen what this offense can be, and I've seen what this defense can be. Now it just all has to come together, for God's sakes. Okay, maybe it will. Maybe it will, Kendrick, and it will start. I tell you what, though, if it doesn't start to come together starting next week, you're going to lose by 3 touchdowns. Yeah. So we'll get a better idea how close or far away you are against by far the best team you will have played to this point and on the road, Kendrick. Chris, it's time for Vance Joseph to be fired. Sean Payton needs to clean house. Don't think it's going to happen that quick, Zach, but I think you'll find like-minded here with Chris.
100%. Yeah, I do think he'll get the season more than likely, unless they just allow like 40 points a game for the next 5 weeks. But, Sean Payton directly handpicked VJ. There were better candidates in that pool, including who I thought Rex Ryan was the better fit for this scheme and better fit for this defense. But he'll probably get the year, play it out, and maybe move on. Because if they do it sooner, it's a direct indictment on Sean Payton. And knowing his ego, he doesn't want that egg on his face. He has enough right now.
VJ's bend, but don't break is broke, says Cody. Diamond wants to put all this on Sean Payton. Says Sean Payton is trash. I don't want to hear it. All right. Well, should I say don't listen? No, I think one of the problems you could run into, I think Sean Payton's a hell of a coach. But like I said, some of these coaches, not some of them, 99% of every coach I ever met has a massive ego to go along with a little bit of insecurity. And trying to be the chef and the grocery shopper can be a little tough. It's 2 jobs. And if there's been failures to this point from Sean Payton, it's personnel decisions, including coaching staff, Zach.
Mm-hmm.
FA coming in again. He says, why is Kareem Jackson on this team? Cost us a game last week. He doesn't make the hit last week on 3rd down. Who knows? Today he makes a hit, gets ejected, and you can see the tide turning. Get him off the team. He's a liability out there. Yeah, and then, he's your number 2, maybe. And then you go to Turner Yell, and how long does he ends up lipping off? And then Sang Bassi comes in at safety, who we were actually calling to play safety earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I started going back to the fact of with personnel. I just ran through, I'm to my 4th or 5th safety, Zach, among other things, but I'm not willing to excuse the partnership of general manager between Payton and Payton that you are down to such dire straits at safety when the problems that arose were problems in June.
Yeah.
I got an injury, and an old guy. Wow. And that didn't work out? Really? I'm shocked.
I'll say this about Payton, and I've been a staunch supporter. I still like him as a general manager. I'm not quite yet on the fire Payton train, but I think his fatal flaw so far is relying too heavily on injury-prone players, Caden Stearns being one of them. They kind of were banking that Caden was going to take the next step next to Simmons, and Caden, who's been injury-prone, got hurt again out for the year. But FA, you are preaching to the absolute choir. I have been asking myself this question since pretty much 2020. Why is Kareem Jackson still on this team? Why is he starting? I have never missed PJ Locke more than I did the last couple weeks because he's just not it at safety. And now it's getting really old with the headhunting and the drawing the personal fouls and contributing. I mean, he was a direct reason, Scott, why the Broncos lost last week. That call it ticky-tack if you want, but he was kind of headhunting, 15-yard penalty, extended the drive. They lost by 1 point. I'm sick of it, and I'm sick of seeing KJ out there. I agree, FA.
And 100%. The once you get a reputation, you got to do it a little bit cleaner than everybody else. And Naj comes in, hot pink. Appreciate the big super chat, my friend. Says, we've been rebuilding for 6 years, and the results have worsened. I feel the deep pain loyal Broncos fans feel when the opposing offense is on the field. We can't stop them. I'm done. Next time I watch a game, we'll be at the meet and greet. Too painful. We're looking forward to seeing you, Naj, and keep an eye on the scoreboard and watch a win, and then watch it in reverse. That'll make you feel better. And the rebuilding. See, when it says we've been rebuilding for 6 years, this is my 3rd season covering the Broncos. There hasn't been really any rebuilding being done in the last 3 years. In fact, it's been I'm going to take a shot. I think I've already got the team. So leading into that point of Russell Wilson, I would agree with you, Naj, that we were rebuilding to this point. We're a quarterback away. We heard that a few times, right? We're just a quarterback away. Well, that wasn't rebuilding. That was we're loading up and taking a shot. And I think you overestimated big parts of your roster based on the health and availability. And that's cost you, Zack.
I think you absolutely nailed it. You took the words out of my mouth. They've never gone through a full-scale rebuild. They've taken half measures toward a rebuild. It's been a reboot or a reset or anything but a full-fledged rebuild. And that's why you're never going to get anywhere unless you jump into the water. They've been dipping their toe in for far too long. And the thing with a rebuild is you're pretty much chalking a season up or maybe multiple seasons up to all for naught. You're going to lose a bunch of games. You're going to be bad. You're not going to make the playoffs, but you have to get through it to get better. The Broncos haven't committed to that. They've been trying to plug in a quarterback, change a coach, change a general manager. They haven't taken all the steps collectively at once that would require and entail a full rebuild. And that's why it feels worsened.
We've had some hot pink. Now we're coming in red hot from Michaela Parker. Appreciate you being here. Speechless. Season is over. I am done with the Broncos. I don't believe you, Michaela. Be pissed. You'll never be done with the Broncos. It hurts too good. There's a song by Hailstorm that I love. It's something like that. I miss the misery. That's what it's called. You'd miss it. You'd miss it. We'd miss you. That's for sure. Hope you're doing well. You have a right to be pissed. You have a right to be upset. And you have a right to think that, again, you're not that far away. I'm going to get my hopes up. And again, Zack, we were live. We're sitting here in the green room together when the Hail Mary comes in, but you're down 2. And it's just like, all right, I know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to miss a 2-point conversion. I'm going to get this hope. It's going to be so awesome. I can't believe what just happened. Yeah, don't get your hope. You're going to lose it. It's just kicking the balls right there. That little bit of hope. It's the hope that kills.
Yep.
So appreciate you, Michaela.
I will say though, Scott, week 1 was, it's a must win because it's McDaniels and it's a season opener and you haven't beat the Raiders. And week 2, yeah, it's a must win because you really can't start 0-2, but no such thing really exists as a must win in week 2. Week 3 is a must win for the Broncos. If they want any shot of salvaging this year, of maybe becoming a 9-8, 10-7 playoff team, a wild card team, you cannot afford to start 0-3.
Anything can happen. And with this team, by God, they turn around and beat the Dolphins after losing to these 2 teams. But going in, you're like, okay, you can win these 2. You're not beating Miami and Miami. And again, anything can happen. Today was a must win, man. Again, I know things can turn around because who helps turn us around? Gregory Vendeland. Certainly appreciate you.
Thank you, Gregory.
Coming in, speaking of red hot, back-to-back red hots. Thank you so much, my friend. I'd say it keeps the light on. It keeps my head shining bright, this big old shiny forehead of mine. So thank you so much. Luke Ellis comes in and say, hey, fellas, haven't lost a faith in Payton, but with Russ, not seeing much to believe in. And I certainly have none in Vance. Appreciate you guys' work right now. These are definitely the dark ages. Go Broncos. Yeah, it feels a little like deja vu. I'm coming out all excited, and all of a sudden by week 2, I'm like, well, damn. There's some big moves that we all appreciated, and then it just hasn't worked out. We talk about a full rebuild. It still might not be able to start after next year, but we've talked before, and we'll talk about it more this week, about how several of these contracts are set up to hit the nuke button, blowing the whole thing up, and Sean Payton's going to rebuild it. That's what you're looking for, Luke.
It's just so freaking depressing every year. I tell myself, especially this year and last year to an extent with Hackett, but especially this year, this will be the year the Broncos make the playoffs. This is the year that they turn it around. This is the year I get to cover a winning season in Denver. And we're talking about now blowing it up and firing the GM and getting rid of the quarterback and, tanking for a draft pick. It really, It's depressing. It hurts. It's the dark ages, and I can't see any light yet at the end of the tunnel.
Lance Blount says, nice showing from Marvin Mims. The pass rushers are starting to make plays. Javonte really looks healthy. Just breathe. Let it ride. Let's ride. Thanks, MHH. Thank you, Lance. I feel like Marvin Mims had 3 straight big plays. He had, the 2 touchdown catches and a punt return back to back to back. Those 2 touchdown catches, they combined for a whopping 113 yards. 1 touchdown catch. Sorry, it was a big play and a touchdown. That led to a touchdown. So those were 2 catches for 113 yards. You know what he finished with on the game?
113.
2 catches for 113 yards. Again, you kind of got away from, and they have to make adjustments too.
2 targets.
Yeah, they didn't get away. Did he pull a hammy? That's been a problem. Is there something that we don't know? Want to find out. Why did you go away from Marvin Mims? That's a question I'd like to hear asked. Obvious coming in 5. Thank you, sir. It's probably obvious to him what's wrong. Faded Wolf Gaming says some awful calls. No call pass interference on 2-point. Washington was short on their 2-point. No face mask on Russ fumble. It's been ridiculous. Yeah, there's something that everybody is complaining about universally about officials. Just kind of how it goes.
Yeah, but Scott, really quickly, I'm sorry, until they deserve the benefit of the doubt, until they shed the reputation they have, I've said it before, they're not going to get those calls. It's egregious. The refs did blow it like usual. It seems to happen against Denver. But once again, you can't blame the refs for the Broncos being in that position. You lead 21-3. You build up that lead at halftime. You have no business having the game come down to a 2-point conversion. I don't want to hear the referee excuses.
Yeah. John Clay says the positive on this is we're making progress towards a top 10 pick and a franchise quarterback on a rookie deal. The dark days will end. Don't miss. That's what hurts you more than anything is making draft picks like that and then missing John Clay. Appreciate you. Steve Hale coming in with the Broncos orange. He says, Semper Fi again, boys. I feel like I'm not supposed to say that. Like there's certain words you can't say. I want to say thank you. I'm afraid to say Semper Fi. Got to be real. Something has to happen with the O-line, and Vance Joseph is just disappointing. A rebuild. It cannot all be on Russ. No, it's obviously not all on Russ by any stretch of the imagination. McGlinchey is not performing to his contract at all. Ben Powers is not performing to his contract at all. Garrett Bowles is not performing to his contract at all. Lloyd Cushenberry is hardly getting paid anything, so you can say he's performing to his contract. And Quinn Miners is well outperforming his rookie contract, Zach. So that's a push, 3 negatives and a positive from an investment standpoint on your offensive line.
It's true. Yeah, I think they're late in the game. I saw a boot action from Russ where as soon as he rolled, he was just demolished because McGlinchey blew a block. And this is something that we've been talking about since preseason. And we thought, they'll get it corrected. It's a glitch. It's going to take some time. I know the Commanders' defensive line is tremendous. And again, they get paid too. But 7 sacks allowed. That's what the bottom line is. And you can't win many games when your quarterback is on his back 7 times in 60 minutes.
Yeah, and how many hits did he end up taking? QB hits, Washington had 14, Denver had 8.
Jesus.
So, and the thing is, I can make that sound worse. Well, Russell did end up with 32 attempts. For a while, it was Sam Howell had 32 and Russell Wilson had 9. That was what it was for a while. So once they forced him into passing because they gave up a lead, it got tough. James, coming in 2 weeks, 2 home games. Broncos season is already over. Tired of these one-possession games with us losing in the end. Safe to say we lost the trade. Yeah, I don't think there was any doubt, unless you're talking about the Saints trade. That one's a little bit longer. We'll figure that one out. But I think you had a pretty good idea last year that you lost the Russell Wilson trade. Now you're just trying to get what you can back out of it, James.
Salvage it.
Christian says it's pronounced like Harris. So thank you, sir. He says, Christian Garris says, if you end the year with a top 10 pick, what position are you looking to add to? You're going to need a quarterback of the future. We're talking about a top 10 guy with a rookie contract. You're going to need another cost-controlled wide receiver. I still think you need an alpha rush end. You got to stop passing on tackles. You haven't drafted one since Garrett Bowles. I need another 300-pounder on the defensive line, and I need a cornerback too. That's a lot. So basically, you can go the best player you think that's available in the spot and win. But if it's close to a quarterback, I think you're going to have to go quarterback.
I am right there with you in lockstep. I would prioritize a quarterback and the tackle responsible for blocking the quarterback, because Garrett Bowles is looking like, you mentioned the term salary dump, or get rid of these aging, salary camp pampering contracts like Garrett Bowles. He's chief among them. Him, Simmons, maybe Randy Gregory. I would look for a tackle. Absolutely.
Rose. This is supposed to be a run-first offense. Is McGlinchey washed? Manhurts is a blocking tight end. Is Judy good? Goodness, the defense, it blows. Keep it up, fellas. Thank you, sir. McGlinchey hasn't looked good. He missed all of camp. He's 2 games in. You got to think that's got to get better. Same with Powers, getting closer to a new scheme. Manhurts, I haven't seen a lot of him. In fact, some of the best blocks I saw was from Burton. I love a fullback. Yeah. Is Judy good? Yeah, Judy's good. But he's also coming off of say it with me together, everybody, injury, and is his first time back. It's there's a lot of redundancy here. Ryan coming in, Broncos Orange, said, I've supported Russ from day one. I'm officially done. It's time to draft a young quarterback that has not been tainted by anyone except Sean Payton. Yes, if anybody's going to be tainted, it should be by Sean Payton. Groom him for Payton's offense. It's time to rebuild everything. See, again, I don't blame Russell Wilson for this loss, but that doesn't mean I disagree with you. It is time to draft a young quarterback. It absolutely is. I don't think you can rebuild this team to get where you want to be, and then while stuck under the contract extension that is going to kick in next year. Hadn't even kicked in, y'all. It kicks in next year. I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can get where you want to be with Russell Wilson and a $50 million a year cap hit.
I honestly feel like they're setting up Russ for what the Niners did, where they had a veteran, a quarterback that was experienced, knows the system, but they still had enough foresight. Didn't work out for them with Trey Lance, but they had enough foresight to have a young player in the pipeline that could eventually take over. Or even like the Patriots did with Jarrett Stidham or Jimmy Garoppolo behind Tom Brady. You have to have someone behind Russ. But I'd like to know, to the previous comment, what was it about today's game? If you don't blame Russ exclusively for the loss, what was it that made you jump off the bandwagon? Because I'm still not seeing it completely.
Yeah, mine's not about Russell Wilson in his play. It's about his contract and where the rest of this team is. I think you've got to move on from Russell Wilson for the same reason the Seahawks thought they needed to move on from Russell Wilson, because we're not there and we've got an asset. We think the difference is Russell Wilson won't be an asset to you the way he was for the Seahawks. It's just that his contract is a liability. And Aaron comes in, appreciates you, and asks, what does it look like with a contract? Well, the contract goes to, in 2024, jumps to a $35 million cap hit against an $85 million dead cap hit. You can't cut him. You'd end up, even if you spread it across 2 years, it would be more than if you just benched him. So you draft a guy that you can let him play behind with a missing year, or you just mothball him. You put him on the bench and forget him. Put him on a non-football injury list or something. Michaela's asking what's happened to my super chats. I know one of them has come in. Michaela, I'm working my way down. She's asked me on Twitter. I'm live here, actually, Michaela. But I saw the alert, and I'm working my way down here, where it's a busy night in the gut reactions, and lots of folks coming in. So appreciate you. I scrolled down and saw the red and highlight those for sure. Obvious says, let's just tank for Shedeur or Caleb rather than completely suck for the next 2 years and get some young talent and see if anyone gives you anything for Wilson. And that's the problem. It's not with that contract. You're not going to get anything. And as Diamond says, and this is what I said, was personnel decisions, including coaches. If VJ is the worst DC, who hired him? Well, Sean Payton did. I'd be real interested to hear the story on Rex Ryan and what happened there.
Yeah.
I would. I'd be interested. Speaking of Ryan, how about some effort recovering the fumble, Russ? Well, that sounds eerily familiar. I didn't see this play. It couldn't have been as bad as the Teddy Bridgewater tackling.
There it is. I was going to bring that up too. Yeah,
couldn't have been that bad. That was awful.
No, that was a lack of interest in the game of football. And as we all know, Russ does not have that lack of interest. I mean, you guys are dug in your ways against Russ, and anything that he does that can be perceived negatively, you will point out. It is what it is. I don't think that was the reason why the Broncos lost, but everyone's entitled to their own opinion, Scott.
O-line, who's your weak point? Was it because Washington Commanders were blitzing? He asked. Who would you say was the weak point right now on the offensive line?
I think Cushenberry is still getting pushed around quite a bit. It's just not as evident, but Mike McGlinchey, for the money he's making, Scott, I mean, $80-something million, I'm assuming top 5 right tackle or close to it in the NFL. He's still getting bull rushed and kind of worked way more than I thought he would. Ben Powers has settled down a little bit, but it's tough because you go against Max Crosby in week 1. Great player. You go against the Washington D-line in week 2. That's a tremendous unit. So it's not been the easiest assignments, but I've been really disappointed so far in Mike McGlinchey.
And here's the thing is McGlinchey's contract isn't really like Randy Gregory's. Randy Gregory's was 2 years, $26 million, and then you could move on.
Yeah.
Forget that. The $70 million or whatever was nonsense. It was 2 years, 26, and right now he's gone. You'll have paid him 2 years, $26 million, and he'll be gone. That's the way he's playing. McGlinchey is only a $6 million cap hit this year because you backloaded so much of it. And next year it jumps to 18.5 with a $29 million dead cap hit. So you better get something out of him the next 2 years. Right now, the weak point for me, and it's not even the weak point. Who's the strong point? That's the other point is it's like, okay, I've got a couple of weak points, but where's my plus? I only got one right now. And Michaela's, she's just about had it. She says, we'll be 0-3 next week. The season is over. When is the meet and greet? October 22nd, 23rd, I think. 22nd. I just know it's the Packers week.
Week 7, October 22nd. We will see you there, Michaela. And if the Broncos do lose that game, at least we'll be commiserating together.
Yeah, that's the one I'm sure of is the Packers weekend. And I've got my stuff packed, and I know it's not next weekend, so I haven't really focused in on it. Hope we'll see you again. There. C-Join comes in. It feels like we went from a top 10 D to a bottom 5-0. Bottom 5 D. I can't read all these numbers. I'm getting confused, Zach. You want to try one?
We went from a top 10 defense to a bottom 5-0 to a top 5 to a bottom 5D, 15 overall O. I guess it's like a Jekyll and Hyde, whereas 1 year the defense looks good and the offense looks bad and vice versa. I get what he's saying, and it's kind of frustrating for sure that they just can't be both good in the same year.
Rock Chalk comes in. He says the defense just got schooled by Sam Howell. And as you said it, what do you think Tua? If that's Tua and Tyreek Hill out there and Jalen Waddle, they're going to get smoked next week in Miami. 0-3 is coming. This team is in disarray. When are they going to get their first win? Jets, maybe? They'll win one that will surprise you. And wouldn't it be screwy? If they go out and do something silly, like beating the Dolphins in Miami, everything that we've said about the past 2 weeks disappears. Mm-hmm. It just flat out disappears. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh man, this team is exactly who we thought they could be. Now we're good to go. You never know, man. You never know. That's why we tune in every single week. For now.
There's two schools of thought, though. If they beat the Dolphins, it's either look how amazing everything is now and the last 2 weeks don't matter, or who cares if they beat the Dolphins? They couldn't beat the Commanders and the Raiders. It should be a great topic of conversation one way or the other next week.
Jonathan Ward says, we've seen this for 8 years, so it's no surprise. And that's the more things change, the more they stay the same. And that does get frustrating. Kyle Heckman says, hasn't Judy only had 5 100-yard games, only 2 in the first 15 weeks of a season, going on his 4th season? When I'm allowed to say this guy is a bust outside the last 3 weeks of lost seasons, of course, puck him, hashtag. And Kyle, what you're saying is, he doesn't show up when it matters, but hey, when the season's over, hey, here's Jerry Jeudy getting garbage yards. Not saying you're wrong, that's for sure. You've got one. You've picked up his option. It's not overly expensive for a wide receiver. It'll be about 13 million, I think, 14 million next year. But you've got 3 guys on contracts that are going to be 8 figures. You've got Judy, Sutton, and Patrick. You're only going to have one of those next year. You're going to have one 8-figure receiver. So you're going to have to do something about that. C. Joint says, we did a 28-3, Scott. I was having flashbacks. We don't talk about 28-3 on the pod that I'm on. Michael Roche says, what's up, guys? It's been a while since I caught the pod live. We'll appreciate you checking in. I'm going to the game next week in Miami. Wish me luck. Keep up the good work and go Broncos.
Good luck, Michael.
Good luck. And I'm hoping it's still summer. It's been fooling us down here. It was in the 60s here in Georgia all day. It's still going to be hot. So drink water, lots of sunscreen, my friend, lots of sunscreen, and have a good time. Get on TV while you're there. Ronnie Ray says, Zach, I agree with what you said about VJ and the defense, but how much is that failure on D you chalk up to execution? And again, I think you feel a lot of it has to do with scheming and Vance Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think the majority of the blame falls at the coach's feet because that's what they get paid to do is put players in a position to succeed. And as a coach, it ultimately they bear responsibility. But it's not 100% because like in most things in life, it's not completely black and white. It's very much gray. There are multiple reasons why the Broncos lost today's game. There are multiple reasons why on the defense blew the game for the Broncos. I think scheming was 90%, but yeah, they're 10%, 15%, whatever, is also the players not executing, is not performing up to task. I mentioned the almost Justin Simmons play last week, the interception. I mean, if he's a top safety in the NFL, he has to make that play. Kareem Jackson, you can't launch yourself and cost yourself an ejection and 15-yard penalty. So Ronnie, absolutely, the players are getting paid lots of money, including Randy Gregory, who disappeared after that sack, as you pointed out, Scott, including Zack Allen, who after a tremendous training camp has been really quiet, got a big contract. So it's up to them. And that's why I pushed back last week against the lack of talent narrative in Broncos country. They have the talent, but at some point it's up to those players, the all pros, the pro bowlers, the highly paid guys. It's up to them at some point to just do your job and make a freaking play, regardless of the coaching, regardless of the scheme, regardless of the opponent or the down and distance. It's still you versus somebody else. And all too often, they don't have that dog on defense.
So we mentioned, we can agree, disagree on levels of talent versus scheme versus talent. I think we all agree there's enough talent not to give up 5 straight scoring drives to the Commanders.
Yes.
And Sam Howell and the Commanders. No offense to them, but you shouldn't be giving up 5 straight scoring drives to anybody, let alone a quarterback making the second start of his career. Steve Hale coming in, he says, even Vic Fangio defense had trouble getting off the field. I feel like we will see the ROI on Russ when we can actually protect him. It might be too late for that, man. He's getting old. No quarterback with this line will be successful. A look at the Commanders' quarterback. And again, we've said it. Zack said it. We've said it both. We've both said it. This loss wasn't on Russell Wilson. You're not losing this game because Russell Wilson didn't play well. That's not why. Russell Wilson had a good game. Was he flawless? No. Were our expectations unrealistic for him? Yes. But was he the number one reason you lost this game? He's not even in the top 5, man. So, the ROI, my point on Russell Wilson is by the time you're able to put a team around Russell Wilson to get an ROI, it'll be too late. It'll be 37 years old. It'll be too late. Russell Wilson was a win now move. It just was. Maybe unless you think you can get 6 years out of him, I don't. Zack?
Well, maybe it's my opinion, but I feel like you're already getting an ROI out of Russell Wilson, especially more so than last season. I mean, last week, he threw 2 touchdowns. He was definitely not the reason the Broncos lost that game. Today, you can count the Hail Mary, obviously, that kind of padded his numbers, but 300 plus, 3 touchdowns, a pick, and 107 quarterback rating. You're starting to see the Sean Payton effect come out. And if you watch drive by drive, yeah, they went into a shell. They didn't play good in the second half, but just the play calling, the tempo, it's gotten so much better. And Russell Wilson has benefited. But it's one of those things. It comes down to winning versus losing. If the Broncos would have lost today's game, or won today's game, excuse me, and Russell Wilson had the exact same stat line, majority of Broncos fans would be celebrating what Russ did. But because they lost the game, oh, they go right to him. He didn't play good enough. He didn't throw for 500 yards. He didn't throw 7 touchdowns. It's all on Russ. That's the narrative.
They'll all say, the quarterback gets too much credit when they win and too much blame when they lose, and that's why he's getting $50 million. I don't feel too bad for him on that, as long as we're talking about his play, or lack thereof. We're talking about. So I'm okay with that. Quarterbacks get paid a lot to put up with some of the unrealistic expectations. Friendly Giant says, where is JL Skinner? I'm sick of Kareem. Wilson playing like Keenum for 240 times the cost. Why did VJ call a 10-yard cushion all day like Howell is Josh Allen? Find the refs. But hey, Jokic is back next month. Dude, you squeezed in a mouthful on that one.
Lot to unpack here.
Love it. Love it. JL Skinner was drafted hurt and then got dinged up again in training camp. Michaela says, where are my super chats? There's a third one. Is anyone monitoring the chat? The trolls. I am not tonight. That much I can tell you. I can't say if anybody is or not. And here's another one. She went back to back. This is 4.
Thank you, Michaela.
It's the gut reactions are really, really busy. So appreciate your patience. I'm too old. When we were talking about, when I said earlier, I said, Michaela, don't give up. There are brighter days and they'll be that much better. You'll be here. You'll outlast this team. Anybody that's on this team, you'll be here when they're long gone. This is a job for them. Y'all are fans for life. I'm too old. I fear I won't see brighter days. So depressed. Dude, if you're too old, I'm way too damn old. And I know it. I know it'll get better. Casey, it's good to see you. He says, what if this has been a plan behind closed doors? Make Wilson look decent for a potential trade value and tank prior to the season to truly start franchise with quarterback from the upcoming draft. Casey, I just don't think you're showcasing to try and get a trade because the contract is so far against you. Even with a trade, if someone were to pick up his entire money because you gave so much of it as a bonus, it still wouldn't make a big enough difference. So I just don't see that. I can't pull it up right now. It's not coming up right now for some reason, but your dead caps would still be roughly equivalent to what his salary is. So you're neutral, and you're not going to get first round draft pick plus for Russell Wilson anymore.
I was trying to find some tinfoil to put on my head to read this question, but I couldn't do it. No, I'm playing with you, Casey.
His base salary in 2024 is only $17 million. His cap hit is $85 million. So if someone traded for him and took his whole salary, you wouldn't save anything.
I don't think there was some super secret plan to showcase Russ and then tank for Caleb Williams. I think the plan was to make Russell Wilson a better quarterback, to beef up those around him, and let the defense do what it did on autopilot from last year. I think the bigger misfire on Sean Payton's part was entrusting that defense with VJ. And again, we can disagree on this, but he was not the right coordinator in 2017, 2018, and he damn sure isn't the right coordinator now. I kind of feel like, Scott, really quickly, and now you have enough data points to look back on. Tell me if you agree. I feel like Sean Payton is making the same mistake that Vic Fangio made, just in reverse. Vic Fangio kind of ignored the offense as a defensive guy and left the offense in the wrong hands. Sean Payton is an offensive guy, and he's kind of ignoring the defense and left them in the wrong hands as well. VJ is the reason why they're 0-2 right now. Yeah,
that's why I hired a former head coach that I thought I could trust to come in and do it again. I would love to hear the full story on why Rex Ryan is not in charge of this defense. If it's just as simple as I thought Vance Joseph would do a better job, or I didn't want the circus of Rex Ryan, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear the backstory on that one. Naj comes in, and this brings up another point that I just remembered. I can't believe we're 75 minutes into this thing, and it just crossed my mind again. The hold on Ben Powers, then the fumble by Russ culminated with that indefensible hit by KJ. How about when we start talking about players, how about holds, 2 of them for automatic first downs from my boy Fabian Moreau? did anybody warn you that he can't play? I feel like somebody around this MMH crew on this side who watched him for a full year warned y'all. You don't want to see him on the field. Again, it comes back to, and I'm sensitive about this kind of stuff because you'd say stuff like that. And when I was in recruiting, it's so much better in the NFL. People, I guess you know more than the coaches, huh? Well, sometimes I do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes. It's possible. They're not infallible. That's why they get fired all the time. They're not going to be 100% right. I know I'm not going to be 100% right, but Fabian Moreau's a liability out there, and you had him out on the field. That is personnel, man. That's not Vance Joseph. That's personnel. Anyway, the Commanders came to life because of this sequence of events, and at that moment, I knew they wanted it more, and Bieniemy owned VJ. I think it goes back to the beginning of the show when we say the lack of mentality from this team, the mental toughness from this team, Zack and Naj.
Yeah, it's definitely lacking, and you have to be good enough to overcome a penalty. You have to be good enough to overcome a turnover. The best teams can weather any storm. And it sounds cliche, but I mean, look at the old Patriots teams. Look at even in recent seasons, Kansas City. If Mahomes throws a pick, they can still come out on top. They don't have to go into a shell. And what's something that's so depressing about today's game is kind of an earmark of recent Broncos teams since Peyton Manning, whereas they have one hiccup, whether it's a penalty, whether it's a turnover, whether it's a bad series, whatever, they cannot seem to overcome it. They get hit in the mouth and they go into a defensive shell and they lose all of that offensive they have. They lose that punch, that swag, that vigor, that tenacity, the to go up and build a big lead and keep going. But they have one negative sequence and they lose all that, the M word, like you were talking about, momentum. And for a team like the Broncos that's still learning how to win, momentum is everything. And they squander it week in and week out.
So Ethan's he is all about the players on this. And I'm going to ask you a question to back up his point on this. He says, simple, it's the defense. We don't have good defensive players. For all the talk about Fangio and Evero, but let's be honest, their defenses yielded at the end of every half, no different than Vance. We don't have good defensive players, period. I'm going to ask you a question. Out of all the personnel moves, and this is my third team I've been covering in the Denver Broncos, how many of them can you say in the last 3 years is a, without a doubt, 100% positive upgrade to whoever was there beforehand?
It's sad that I'm actually thinking about this. I would say Zach Allen over Draymond, but
I don't think you can say that. I don't think you can say that. There's one. There's one player in 3 years that you've upgraded without a doubt. One, and that's Pat Surtain.
Mm-hmm. That's the gimme, though. I mean,
but that's it. But you know, and that was where you invested. Everything else has been kind of a 1-for-1 that you're hoping for. Maybe I can upgrade Zach Allen for Draymond, DJ for Shelby Harris. Shelby did some good things for Broncos country. But I go to my edges. I lost Von Miller. I lost Bradley Chubb, who did some good things. You know, would I rather have Bradley Chubb or Jonathan Cooper? Well, you know, that might come down to health. But you know what I'm saying on this. One was a 7th, one was a 1st. Vaughn was really good. You haven't been upgrading on the defensive side of the ball. You've been pouring a lot of your resources into the offensive side of the ball, and it's time to get some dividends there. And in the future, it's time to start pouring some of those premium resources onto the defensive side of the ball if you want to have a good defense. I agree with this.
Yeah, Ethan, I'll admit it, and Scott, you as well. The defense definitely is lacking talent-wise in certain areas. I mean, KJ starting at safety, number 1. Again. Jonathan Harris is the player that I was just lamenting all offseason. He has no business starting, same as Deshaun Williams last year. But again, if you give these same players, and I'll make this same argument, these same players to a different coordinator, I don't care if it's Jim Schwartz or Bill Belichick or anyone, would they allow 5 scoring drives to the Commanders? Would they allow 35 points? Would they allow Jimmy G to have, you know, a cup of coffee and a slice of cake in the pocket? No. So it's both. It's never really black and white. It's always gray. It's a personnel issue and it's a schematic coaching
Yep.
issue.
You know, I would agree in saying that there needs to be more resources poured into the defensive side of the ball, that we overrate the talent that's on that side of the ball, and they're not playing to the potential for the guys that they have. I don't think it's an either or. I think it is an and on that one. But again, like I said, when just reading Ethan's question here on this very generous super chat, it made me think. I'm like, all right, where have you actually upgraded in 3 years of transactions? There's a first-round draft pick that hit out of the park. That's the only first-round draft pick you've had in my 3 seasons covering this team was Pat Surtain. Knocked that one out of the park. Appreciate you, Ethan. Hope you're doing well. Tom says, sad day. Hope and faith are grim. This girl cutting my hair one time said her name was Faith. I'm like, oh, that's a really cool name. And then we started talking about middle names. She's like, yeah, my middle name's Joy. My parents really wanted a girl. Faith Joy. So this is hope and faith and grim. So Tom, chin up, my man. It'll get better days. And Ryan says it's a contract and I'm done with the look at me hope loss. Speaking of the Mr. Unlimited crap, as he says, and the mediocre play, Stidham can do what he's doing. And I've seen this before. I saw in Atlanta with Matt Ryan towards the tail end of his career while the team was losing. He had the highest cap hit in the NFL and was still a top 10 quarterback. But man, people wanted him gone. This team isn't doing well and he's taking up a bunch of money. I've seen this before. And Ryan did some good things. Russell hasn't built up that goodwill with the Denver Broncos. I got one last super chat, then I'm going to hit a couple quick ones on Facebook, then we're going to get out of here. Gina, I saw you over on Facebook too. Thank you so much for coming in on both sides of this. Just think VJ and the defense could learn a thing or two from Coach Prime and CU, as he said best at the end of the college game, resiliency and patience, and belief comes in with some of that. And as we've talked about all night, is the mental toughness. The mental toughness that this team kind of lacks, Zach.
Yeah, and I don't think the Buffs under Coach Prime lack that at all. He has them playing. We talk about coaches getting the most about their players and players playing up to their standards. Coach Prime is getting every single player on that team to play above their potential or above expectation, because that's what a really good coach does. And he puts them in those situations where they can succeed. And that's why they've started how they've started. That's why the Broncos have started how they've started. So it's definitely, there's player issues in abundance. And I'll again eat crow. I thought the Broncos roster was front to back a little more talented, a little more top heavy, and they weren't. But there's coaching issues that are still plaguing this team that I thought were put behind us. And it's become glaringly apparent that they haven't been.
Yep, I agree. Brandon Williams on Facebook, he says, I'm fed up like everyone else, but I still think we shouldn't try to blow it up until after next year and get a new DC. You might get a new DC anyway, but the thing is, the way that the contracts line up, the nuke button is set for next year, for the beginning of 2024. For sure. So Ethan, real quick, I'm back on the chat. There was like 2,000. Is this the Rashawn Montgomery that needs to be bounced before we hear too much of this stuff? We are about to get out of here. Michael Ranquillo, he says, great show tonight, Zach and Scott on Mile High Huddle podcast. Gut reaction, go Broncos and buck 'em. I think it is probably about time. We went a little long because Chad wasn't here to say, you got to get out of here. You got to get out of here. This was a big night. We understand. So we stayed a little bit longer. And thank you for being here with us. And I think Zach's got a few messages for us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack today. And we try to give every single one of you a chance to vent and complain, as it were, about a Broncos loss. That's why it's the Gut Reaction podcast. But nevertheless, it was a tremendous episode. If you're not doing so, please follow us on Twitter at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account on Twitter at Mile High Huddle. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Kelberman NFL. And don't forget about Chad at Chad and Jensen. A little weird that out of order. I'm a creature of habit. But anyway, if you haven't yet, check out our merch, mhhmerch.com, including Buckham merchandise. If you haven't seen it yet, drop us a like at facebook.com/milehuddlepod. If you're on Instagram, you can follow us at mile_high_huddle. And if you haven't, please leave your football priest and our Deacon Scott a 5-star review for a chance to win some of that merch each and every single month. But if anything, please, please, please subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow. and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
I think I nailed that one. All right, I want
Got
to say
it.
a couple shout outs to some folks on YouTube. Facebook, we're going to have to get y'all on Twitter. It was a really busy night. Lucas, Patriot Tech a couple times. Christian Harris, Garris a few times. Addison, Plum Bob, Jonathan Figueroa, Isaiah 1127, Chris Hernandez, Flazify, Am I Saying Meow, Diego, Phoenix, Grover, S.A. Russ, F.A. multiple times, MJA, Elliott, David McElrath, Shiloh, Justin, Kendrick, Ethan several times, the DWI guys, Chris Varela, Cody Dubb, Diamond Rattler, Luke Ellis, Naj, Faded Wolf Gaming, Lance Blount, John Clay Evington, Steve Hale, James Todd, I Rose, Michaela Parker, the Duchess several times, Ryan, Aaron Obvious, Rohit, C Join, Rock Chalk, Jonathan Ward. I'm running out. Thank you so much, everybody. Casey, Friendly Giant, Gina, Tom Lockoff. It was a busy night, y'all. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. It's so humbling.
Yeah, try to have a great rest of your weekend. I believe it is Scott and I back in the saddle tomorrow evening, covering for Chad. I'm pretty sure. So we'll see y'all then.
I think you're right.
And Scott, you're doing BFB in the morning,
Yeah,
correct?
I'll have Broncos for breakfast tomorrow morning too. We can get into some of the other things. We can get into a lot more. It's going to be a busy week.
It'll be a fun day. Relatively speaking, we'll have the aftermath tomorrow night. Take care. And as always, though, go Broncos.